Here we have a microscope slide of an ovary. We can see primordial follicles here. There's also a primary follicle, which is a single layer of cube-shaped or sometimes columnar-shaped cells. This follicle is a secondary follicle because it's got more layers of those cube-shaped cells. Here's a great example of the corpus luteum. We can tell that's the corpus luteum simply because you can see the space where the ovum was ovulated. And here we have a tertiary or antral follicle. Over on this side we can see another tertiary follicle, which is actually a Graafian follicle because you can see the ovum inside ready to be ovulated. We're going to take a closer look at some of these structures. Again, on here we have primordial follicles, primary follicles, secondary follicles, tertiary follicles, and the corpus luteum. Primordial follicles have one layer of squamous epithelium surrounding them. Primary follicles have one layer of cube-shaped, or sometimes they'll look slightly columnar-shaped cells surrounding them. Because it's difficult to prepare slides, sometimes you might see a little overlap of cells. Don't pay much attention to that. Focus on the majority of what's surrounding the follicle. So those are the simple cuboidal epithelium surrounding the primary follicle. Here we have a secondary follicle. We can tell it's secondary because there definitely are more layers of cube-shaped cells, and here is part of the corpus luteum that we saw earlier. This is a tertiary, antral, or Graafian follicle. We know it's a Graafian follicle because we can see the oocyte that's going to be extruded with ovulation soon, and you can see the many layers of cells surrounding that follicle. Before I increase in magnification, remember that the fluid-filled space within a tertiary, antral, or Graafian follicle is known as the antrum, and tertiary follicles contain secondary oocytes, whereas primordial, primary, and secondary follicles contain primary oocytes. Here we see a primordial follicle. You can see because the cells around it are flat. Here we have another primordial follicle. This one is starting to turn into a primary follicle because you can see that the shape of the cells is becoming more cuboidal. Here again we have another primary follicle. Here we have a secondary follicle. Here we have the tertiary follicle. Again, sometimes referred to as an antral follicle because of the fluid-filled antrum. Sometimes referred to as a Graafian follicle when the oocyte is about to be ovulated. Remember, primordial, primary, and secondary follicles contain primary oocytes. Only the tertiary follicles contain secondary oocytes. The outer portion of the ovary is referred to as the cortex, whereas the inner portion is the medullary portion of the ovary.